And you're live.
Okay, hi everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this. I have never done an official reading before, so this is like really exciting for me, but also completely terrifying. I think the format for this is sort of I introduce myself for sort of 5-ish minutes and then read to you for 5 to 10 minutes and then take questions if there are any. So my name is Annabel and I'm a fantasy writer living in Scotland. I live in this lovely piece of countryside between Edinburgh and Glasgow with my husband Omar, my gorgeous collie dog, and my evil mastermind of a cat. My day job is as a medical writer, and I have a PhD in heart science, which is of absolutely no use to my writing whatsoever. Like most writers, I've been writing for a long time. It's one of those things I've really picked up and put down all my life. And it's something that I used to talk about a lot until I had this sort of bad interaction with someone about it. And then it sort of became this weird secret activity that I didn't tell anyone about. So I can't even tell you how weird it feels to sign up for a reading at QuaranCon and actually read some of my nonsense out loud to actual people. So about 2 years ago, maybe-ish, because COVID time is weird, I started writing again properly. And I applied to a mentorship scheme being run by Kate Nash Literary Agency. And I was really lucky to get one of those places. And through that, I got to work with my excellent agent, Justin, who has been very patient with my incredibly slow progress. So where I am right now is that I'm working on this book, which I'm going to read from today. I'm sort of getting it ready to send the second draft back to my agent. I really want to do it soon because I super want to know what he thinks, but also I'm completely terrified to find out what he thinks. So this is a work in progress, just to warn you. It has not been through an editorial process yet. The book is called The Hollow Mage, and it's about this city called Amaria, which was founded by magic users or mages. And the population is split between people who can use magic and people who can't. So the non-mages, or hollows, as the mages call them. And the story starts at this time where tension is building between the mages and the non-mages, with the city moving towards a civil war. So my main character is the Hollow Mage, Raven. And she's someone who should be a mage. She's been tested for magic, as children in Amaria are, and they found that she really should have magic, but she's never been able to use it. So as the conflict grows, she really doesn't know where she's supposed to fit into all of this. And then my other main character is Helios Akana, who is kind of the opposite of Raven, in that he is the most powerful mage in Amaria. And he's kind of your traditional fantasy mentor character. And what I really wanted to do was have this mentor character. So this character who Raven really looks up to is having all the answers, but he's actually kind of a mess. So he's about as lost and stuck in the middle as she is. And the book sort of really centers around their unlikely friendship. So the bit I'm reading today is actually the second chapter. The book opens with this speech by a charismatic mage in Amaria, Orovin, who's growing in power and influence, and he's widening the divide between mages and non-mages. And Raven attends one of his rallies and witnesses an attack on one of the non-mages. And this is her waking up the next day. So the chapter focuses on Raven, but you actually do get to meet Helios, my other main character, at the end of this section I'm going to read. Okay, and then I am just gonna go for it wherever my chapter's gone. Okay, good. Okay, chapter 2, Raven. The chime of the 7th bell reverberated through the central dome, announcing loudly that Raven was late. It had taken hours, but when sleep finally came, it had been of the kind that left her more exhausted than she would have been without it. She'd woken many times, the blanket twisted around her legs, her skin sheened with a cold sweat. The sound of the bell sank slowly through her consciousness, and it was only after the last chime that she started fully awake. She kicked herself free from the tangled mess of her bedclothes. There was barely enough time to wash, so she splashed a little cleansing water on her face and pulled on her crumpled robes. They were made of a rough homespun fabric, the coloured hem to show her rank nothing more than a stitched-in ribbon of white. It was rubbed to grey at the edges, the dirt so ingrained that nothing but magic would remove it. Too tight in places and too short in others, they barely reached halfway down her shins, but her pitiful academy allowance wouldn't stretch to anything else. She didn't even try to do anything with her hair. It hung limply around her face as usual, falling in front of her eyes in a thick mess of tangled black strands. There was no time to care. Try and Marnie's had been looking for a reason to throw Raven out of her class for months. The last thing Raven wanted to do was give her one. Raven's haste meant that she was ill-prepared for the wave of discomfort which struck her when she stepped out onto the street. Everything was entirely normal. Bright sunlight fell through the purple glass high above Raven's head, touching everything with a slight violet hue. Mages and non-mages hurried past her in swift, purposeful strides, footsteps and rattling wagons filling the still morning air. It was as if nothing had happened, nothing had changed, and perhaps it hadn't. Yet Raven felt strangely sick at the normality of it, as if the scene in front of her sat over reality, like a tracing that didn't quite match. Maybe it isn't quite the same, Raven thought, as she waded out into the busy street. There was still a tension to the air, a new way that people looked at each other. Not a who are you, but a what are you? And are you the right type of person to be here? She saw the black robes of the surveyors 3 times before she even turned a corner into Main Street, though their masked faces were anything but a comfort. Was this part of Orevin's great plan for the Metis district? She wished he hadn't been right about its decline. The district was named for the lowest rank of mage, but these days it housed mainly non-mages. It lay firmly in the shadow of the Academy Tower, populated by old dormitories meant to house Amarayan students who had not yet learnt control, or give temporary homes to those from outside who'd come to study from Amarayan masters. In reality, the dormitories were almost empty, many of the buildings sliding into irrevocable disrepair. The glittering spires which pierced the Amarayan skylines held apartments only for the higher ranks of mages and the wealthiest of the non-mages. Raven wondered if they too were starting to feel empty. The only tower Raven had ever entered was the academy itself. It was not the biggest tower nor the tallest, but it ran straight through the very heart of Amarayan society. Every mage who showed the barest flicker of magical potential had to pass through its doors to learn control. And magic users traveled far and wide to study from the great masters of magic, the wizards themselves. Not that most students would ever experience that lofty privilege. The wizards taught in the high academy, not the shabby classrooms below. The night before had been the closest Raven had ever come to a wizard, and it was likely the closest she'd ever come to one again. As she approached the entrance, Raven half broke into a run, sidestepping and weaving her way through the last lingering mages, her heavy bag bouncing hard against her back. Unlike most of the young Meta, she couldn't use the pattern rooms woven with complex magic, which allowed mages to travel between them in the blink of an eye. As a result, she was almost always late. She could already see the sour look on Tryon Marnius' face and hear the whispers of her classmates as she tumbled in at the back, an added edge to her daily humiliation. The entrance hall of the academy was hushed and somber in the way one would expect to find in a temple rather than a school. Raven's feet slapped loudly off the opaque glass floor, and she felt like she was drawing the heavy gaze of every disapproving mage in the room. Enormous carved pillars of glass reached up to a cavernous ceiling, which seemed made to amplify every cough and dismayed intake of breath. Raven couldn't help her gaze sliding to the pinched faces of the watching mages, looking for something softer and more familiar, even though she knew she wouldn't find a friendly face here. Oomph! For a horrible lurching second, Raven didn't realize what had happened. Then her hands slapped hard against the floor and everything clattered down around her. Her bag, never properly tied shut, had expelled its entire contents onto the floor, all of her worldly possessions scattering away from her in a mess of books, pens, coins, and lint. The mage she'd so dramatically collided with had also thrown up an armful of books, and they had come down to land around him in an undignified heap. He didn't quite seem to realize what had happened, blinking slowly, staring at his scattered possessions. He got to his feet and brushed down his robes with short, brisk motions, tugging his wide sleeves straight at the wrist. sleeves which were edged in a braided cord of yellow gold and vivid scarlet. A wizard. It was only once he straightened up, looming over her, that Raven felt him. His magic hummed in her ears, a bright heartbeat of power that threatened to overwhelm her if she looked at it too directly. Without even a syllable of an incantation, he extended a hand towards one of his books, and it slid easily up through the air and into his outstretched hand, the casual gesture enough to manifest his will into magic. There were maybe 3 people in Amaria who could do such a thing without speaking a word, and only one who could do it with so apparently little effort. Suddenly, Raven's hands felt like they were sticking to the cold glass floor, a sick feeling rising in her throat. She knew exactly who she'd managed to knock off his feet. Wizard Akana. Recognition was beginning to dawn on him as well. He peered down at her as if she were a specimen at the bottom of a jar. Wizard Akana's face was narrow-featured and unkind, his drawn-down eyebrows etching deep grooves into the center of his forehead. There was a flat, angry scar which marked the lower half of his left cheek, disappearing beneath a high collar, rumored to hide worse scarring on his neck. The stories the students told suggested he'd burned himself with his own magic, experimenting with powers no one was supposed to understand. His eyes studied her without mercy. You. He said the word almost like a question, but Raven had no idea how to answer it. She pushed herself back from him, scrabbling to stand. Her legs and arms were weak and trembling, and suddenly she was back on the roof of the shop house, watching a man get attacked for merely falling next to a mage. Sorry, wizard, she managed, her voice small and weak in her own ears. I was running late and... You're late. He narrowed his eyes. And now so am I. His thin mouth drew to one side as he looked down at the books scattered about his feet. But it only took one circular motion of his hand for them all to jump back up into his arms. Despite his lateness, he took a moment to glare down at her one last time, and then, in the greatest display of power that Raven had ever seen, he vanished. Raven had never seen a mage travel without a pattern room, and he'd done it without even a single word of a spell. His sudden departure sucked the air in towards where he'd been standing, fluttering the pages of her books and lifting the hair away from her face. For a moment, all she could do was stare in mute astonishment, blinking at the space he'd just vacated. Then the 8th bell rang overhead, reminding Raven of exactly how late she was. She stumbled to her knees, leaning over to scoop up her belongings back into her bag without even looking at them. Then she heaved her bag back over her shoulder and ran. Okay. And that is, that's the end of the reading. So does anyone have any questions? And I can see myself on YouTube and it's weird because there's a delay. So I'm going to look at Zoom instead, which is less weird. Thanks, Omar. Omar is my husband. Hello, husband. Okay, so Omar's just asked what was my inspiration for the City of Mages. Honestly, I was 13 years old and I had a weird dream about this purple glass city. And that's the worst answer ever, isn't it? It came to me in a dream. But yeah, all the most ridiculous ideas in this book came from me when I was a teenager. And then now as an adult coming back to this, I've had to make them work in a sensible way, which sometimes I wish I'd just started again. Oh, thank you so much, guys. This is lovely. Does anyone have any other questions? The delay is super weird. Oh, Helen's asked, do you have any particular routine for your writing process? Thanks, Helen. Yeah, I mean, I get up before work every day, so my my routine is to get up at 6 in the morning and get to my um, writing desk as soon as I can in the morning. Um, and yeah, no, like my routine is right until like 8, half 8, have breakfast, go to work, and drink a lot of coffee, and write as much as I can in the weekends and the holidays. And now we're back to the weird delay part. Claire's asked, what kinds of real world issues do you most like to explore in fantasy? That's a good question. I mean, I guess with this, obviously, I'm dealing a lot with ideas of identity and fitting in and finding your place. And that, yeah, I think that's probably the core of what this book is about, like that sense of belonging. And yeah, I mean, found family, right, is a lovely theme to work with. Um, and then the next question, do you draw on any people you know for characters? Hell no, that would be the worst. Like, I do not want people to be like, oh my God, that was me and you wrote me into your book. But of course, like I draw on like little bits that, you see people do, like yeah, little tiny things like gestures or habits that you think, oh yeah, that's fun, I'll give that to that character. Um, plus, like, I mean, there's tons of myself in my characters, I can't help it. But like, I tend to give my characters all my flaws because that seems like the best way to exercise those. um, yes, anyone have any other questions? Omar's asked, what is your favorite part of writing? Oh my God, I really love it. Like, so it's hard to pick out like one favorite bit, but I mean, for sure, for me, it's the characters. Like, yeah, I love getting to know my characters. I love that moment when your character behaves in a certain way, and then you're thinking for a bit about like, their family, their backstory, their friends, and you're like, oh yeah, no, that that totally explains why they did that. But I kind of feel like it should be the other way around, but that isn't really ever how it goes. Um oh, thanks, Pam. Pam says, what flaws? You don't have any. Yeah, I do. Lots of them. Read the book, you'll see them all. Do I have my sequels plotted out? How much foreshadowing is there? And how do you weave this in? No, I do not have the sequels plotted out, but I do know mostly what's happening in book 2. And assuming I ever get this one finished, then yes, I will properly plot out the second one, because the massive rewrite I had to do for draft 2 is not something I ever want to have to do again. How much foreshadowing is there? I mean, I kind of know how everything ends up, right? So hopefully a lot of foreshadowing. But you know how it is when you get to the end of the book and then you sort of go back and you make it all work in retrospect, but no one's supposed to know that. Do I have any other books on the back burner? Asked Omar. Yeah. I have like 3 different ideas. Like, I don't know, I think the longer you work on a project, the more ideas you have for different books, right? So I have like a fun, like, fairy tale kind of vibe, um uh with an, yeah, so the idea being that like there's this entity that like steals stories. So that's one of my ideas. I'd love to write one of those like dark academia alternate world kind of vibe books. Yeah, no, I have loads of things that I want to do, but I shouldn't really be getting distracted right now. Helen asked, do you have a least favorite part of the process? Has it become any easier over the course of completing your draft? Oh yeah, like the cycle of hate. Like, I don't know if other people on here who write have this, but you know, you write something, you're like, oh yeah, this is okay. And then 5 minutes later, you're like, oh my God, I hate this. This is the worst thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And that's probably my least favorite part of writing. I don't know if that's ever gonna get easier. I mean, it does. No, it does. That's a lie. It totally gets a little bit easier the more you write, or at least you learn to ignore it, but it definitely doesn't go away. Pam claims she's never seen a floor, and that's definitely a lie. Omar says, how has it been working with an agent? Yeah, amazing and terrifying. So I was really, really scared. I mean, everyone's scared of feedback, I think, when they start writing, or unless, I mean, I'm sure some people aren't, but I think most people are pretty scared of that. But what I found when I started working with Justin is that it doesn't feel combative feedback, it feels collaborative. So like you're working together on something, and there's actually it's nothing quite like having someone who will actually sit and listen to you waffle about all your writing stuff, and you know, will genuinely work with you to try and make it better. So that's really cool. Obviously, you know, there are times when you have to be like, you know, you have to sit on some feedback for a while and be like, okay, how do I feel about this? Do I agree? Do I not agree? You know, there's obviously aspects of everything that's work, but I'd have to say so far it's been a really great experience. Yeah, no, it's been really good, though there is that sort of added pressure of knowing someone's going to read your work. That's kind of terrifying. As you might have noticed, like a lot of what I'm saying here is that I'm scared of everything to do with writing, or indeed sharing writing in any way. So yeah. Omar asks, are you a member of any writing groups? Yeah, actually. So well, like, yeah, it depends what you call a writing group, right? Like, so there's the Celtic Bitches, hi Pam, and we sort of chat shit about writing a lot. I was about to apologize for swearing, but actually QuaranCon is totally okay with that, so that's okay. I literally just joined the Glasgow science fiction writer circle, which is exciting, although I haven't actually signed on to the forum yet because I've spent all of today fretting about this instead. And I also am on the Discord for the Edinburgh Fantasy Writers group as well. I mean, it's just really nice to talk to other writers. Oh, and also the book camp guys. So like the guys who did the mentorship at Kate Nash, we all have a chat, and we talk about writing together and the process. And actually, that is so great. It is so nice to have people to sort of share all the ups and downs with. How do you get over the fear? Leroy Jenkins, you charge in and try not to think about it. And what's the most important thing you've learned from when you started writing to where you are now? I think learning to take yourself seriously in any way. I mean, I don't mean that you have to be like, I'm going to be a successful author or whatever. I just mean give yourself the space you need to do it. Don't be like, this isn't important. You should be doing something more important right now. That isn't true. This is the most important thing. It matters to you. So, you know, make the time for it. Do the writing. My friend Eve, who's one of the Celtic Bitches, she is like, you know, think about what's your main quest. And I agree with that, right? Like, you know, it doesn't mean that my main, like my day job's not important to me, but I want to make writing my main quest. Oh my God, that sounds so corny saying it out loud. I think we're gonna have to wrap up with, I don't know how long the delay is. Okay, I'm gonna answer Omar's question about what was your first story someone else read. Oh, right. Okay, well, I mean, it depends whether you mean like something original or something that was fan fiction. I mean, the answer is Helen, probably, on this chat for any of my first stuff. Hi, Helen. The first original story I wrote was a total ripoff of the Final Fantasy games. And I think like I killed everyone. Just all the characters died at the end. Helen's possibly never forgiven me for that. I also wrote some really questionable Scarlet Pimpernel fan fiction based on the Richard E. Grant version, which when I watched recently, I'm like, wow, why was I so obsessed with this? I mean, and also I kind of get it because it's like amazingly awful. So yeah, those are the first things that I wrote. I'm not sure I should have admitted to that on YouTube, or it will stay here. Yeah, anyway, I don't know if it's time we should be wrapping up or not. Oh yeah, I got my 5-minute warning from the tech person and I totally ignored it. Thanks, Claire. Sorry, I ignored you. Can I just say thank you so much to everyone who's come to this and asked me questions. I honestly thought I was just gonna be like reading it to my husband and my dog. So I love you guys. Thank you so much. No one needs Scarlet Pimpernel fan fiction, I swear. Yeah. Oh, and thank you to QuaranCon. Oh, hi.
Sorry.